Shabbat Shalom, Mishpacha. So, rather than do the traditional Torah Pasha this week, or the Torah portion reading, I want to do a little study of Daniel the prophet. Just a little study, not too long, not too short, just to give you a little glimpse of Daniel the prophet's life and what was going on. And for that, we'll have to go to chapter 2 of the book of Daniel the prophet. And we read from verse 47. The sovereign answered to Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your Elah is the Elah of Elohim, power above powers, in bracket, and Mare, master lord, of sovereigns, and a reveal of secrets, seeing you could reveal this secret. By the way, this reading is from the Hidden Truths Hebraic Scrolls, which is available at Amazon. And then it says, verse 48, then the sovereign made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and a chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested the sovereign, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the sovereign. Okay, so let's look at it. Daniel, the prophet, tells Nebuchadnezzar, the king, who saw a massive statue sitting on a huge base. It was made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay. I'm going to give you one interpretation. There are a number of interpretations, but let's just go with one interpretation. And it doesn't matter whether you accept this interpretation or you accept another one. But like I said, there's more than one interpretation. The statue that he saw was empires. So gold was the Babylonians' empire. Part of the statue was made of gold. And then we had the silver, which was the subsequent empire of Medo-Persia. Then bronze, which was Greece, Alexander the Great's empire, iron, which was Rome, and then after iron we had the clay, which was the Islamic kingdoms that came after. So the rest of the dream was that a rock would come out of the mountain and it would smash the feet, then the entire statue would be smashed, blowing with the wind or blowing away with the wind. The stone grew and covered the entire mountain. The stone itself represents the kingdom of God. Hence, the world will be ruled by God at one point in future history. Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the most powerful above all powers. In other words, all the false gods put together on this earth, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the most powerful. He is the only God who can reveal secrets. Nebuchadnezzar, who was, by the way, a short height man, he wasn't very tall, he was a dwarf. What's a dwarf? A dwarf is less than 5 foot. So Nebuchadnezzar was less than 5 foot tall. He actually used to sit on a lion and ride a lion. So you have to be a dwarf to ride a lion, because I think a full grown-up man, 5 foot 10 inch, 6 foot man, will have a difficulty riding a lion. So he gave Daniel many valuable gifts and put him in charge of the entire country of Babylon, or in this case would be Iraq in the ancient times. So Daniel was chief of all the wise men, means all the magicians, all the so-called interpreters of stars, the moon, and other things, planets. Daniel was the chief. Daniel was the most wisest. He understood everything. So he goes from the lowest to the highest totem pole. And Daniel's 3 friends, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, we'll come to those towards the end of the lecture. God, by showing dreams, wanted Daniel to do the interpretation, but it did not have to be so significant. So the question would be, why Nebuchadnezzar had to have it his way? So why does Nebuchadnezzar react by wanting to worship Daniel but because he wanted to worship Daniel and wanted to give him offerings and sacrifices to Daniel. Whereas, of course, Daniel didn't consider himself. Listen to this. Today, everybody tells you on the internet, "You're God, you're God, you're God." Daniel, the wise, one of the wisest men in Babylon, did not consider himself to be God. Because if he considered himself to be God, he would have said to Nebuchadnezzar, "Okay, worship me. Give me, offerings and sacrifice." But Daniel refused those. Because this ideology that I find prevailing in so-called law of attraction community and other communities, that you're God, is actually, by Daniel's definition, it's not true. Because you eat, you drink, you sleep. So if we really apply the analogy of God, God doesn't eat, God doesn't drink, God doesn't sleep. So go figure who really is God. So why did Daniel react? And we look at this, that Nebuchadnezzar could have had anger and fear regarding the statue, regarding the whole dream. So why Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom bit on the statue was made of gold? Because gold is more refined metal than the rest, while iron is the strongest metal. So we note that the metals moved down the statue in the dream. The strength means that the strength increasing, but the refinement decreasing. Gold is the purest, and then we had the other metals below it. So that as we go down the statue, the refinement decreased. This reveals that the kingdom led by Nebuchadnezzar, its power came from a more refined source, because Nebuchadnezzar had power over animals like horses not to bray, and they would listen to him. And he would command birds not to fly, and they would listen to him. So, similarly, a question is asked, why would Amalek have to be destroyed? Amalek, by the way, if you don't know, he was a son of Esau, and he hated Israel. The reason why Amalek attacked Israel, because they wanted to prove that Israel is not untouchable, and by extension, neither is God. So this is what Amalek set out to prove, and then God said, Amalek will be destroyed. Amalek today, 2022, is any nation. I don't care who you are, what your flag color is, and what you write on your flag, and what you believe in. Doesn't matter what you believe in. If you hate Israel today, you will still be set for destruction. You will be destroyed at some point in the future. That is what, I didn't say that, God said that, by the way. This has been put in our scriptures, that Amalek is to be destroyed. And Amalek doesn't have to be today the son of Esau. Things have moved on. We don't even know who Esau is today. So when things have moved on, therefore any nation that hates Israel is set for destruction, one way or another. I mean, think about what we just went through, a pandemic. And what happened in the pandemic? Many nations, peoples were being killed, destroyed because of a disease and illness. And certain countries came to their aid. And, I'll leave to your imagination what happened thereafter. So, the Rambam, he writes that idolatry is foolish. But from Enosh on and after Adam, they said God created the universe and the objects. And they said, if we're going to worship God, we might as well worship the moon, the stars, the sun, and everything else. This was considered avodah zarah, idolatry. But the Gentiles started to do it, and they continue to this day. Non-Israel, those people who we call Gentiles today, they live in idolatry mostly, but they don't give it up. You can see it in many places today in the world as well. Whereas Israel, ancient times, and I would say even today, was regarded by the non-Israelites to have had some secret to get to God that they didn't have. They would say that somehow Israel managed to connect to God that they couldn't do it. In other words, Israel not only managed to connect to God, but God spoke to the prophets of Israel. God spoke to and came down even on the mountain. So the whole of Israel had an experience of God. I'm not saying God is not an entity like a human being or an animal or some other shape, but God came down in the form of His glory on the mountain in Saudi Arabia, and God revealed His glory to the whole nation at one point in history, in the past. It'll never happen again like that, but that's what God did. So we find that in Daniel chapter 9 verse 2, the prophet Daniel, he reports had read about the prophecy of Jeremiah, that it will be 70 years before restoration back to Jerusalem for the people who got exiled to Iraq. So what was the key here? The key was that Daniel, now which tribe was Daniel from? Think about it for a moment. Which tribe is Daniel from? Daniel, by the way, was from the tribe of Judah. So, who is Daniel paying attention to? The prophet Jeremiah. Who is the prophet Jeremiah, and why the prophet Jeremiah? Because the prophet Jeremiah was from the tribe of Levite. So even Daniel, who himself is considered a prophet, follows a prophecy of the Levite as truth, as facts on the ground at that time. So it shows that the real tribe of Judah had much respect for the Levim, for the Levites. So we notice that in chapter 3, it says, verse 1, Nebuchadnezzar the sovereign made an image of gold, whose height was 90 feet tall, and the breadth of it 9 feet. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. This was 60 amos, or 90 feet tall. It was around 9 foot wide. That is about 12 stories tall as a building. It was in the province of Dura. Why does it tell us in the province of Dura? What's significance about Dura? The Gemara says that the breadth of 9 foot won't be sufficient to hold such a width, so it suggests that they would put it up and it would fall down, and they would put it up again and it will fall down again, and they had to get more gold to put it up each time. They said that they got the gold from Jerusalem to pour around the idol to hold it up. This is how the gold from Jerusalem was diminished in size by the Babylonians. And why did Nebuchadnezzar proclaim that Daniel's God is above all, and yet, he was building this statue and wanting people to worship it or bow down to it? This is because Nebuchadnezzar, what he was doing was saying that the statue is not going to be gold, silver, copper, and metal. Remember, we had these different metals in the statue. He was trying to undermine the dream. He thought that if he can do that, then he can cause the dream to change. So the dimensions that he used were the same dimensions as in the dream that he was setting up. So he was getting everyone else to agree and define the dream interpretation in some kind of a physical way. He was following a similar route that Balaam suggested earlier in the story with Israel in the Exodus, that in order to defeat Israel, you have to get them to sin or violate the law of the Torah. So he wanted to get the Jews there to sin by bowing to the idol so that God would not restore them. In other words, God would not restore them after the 70 years, and therefore he reasoned that Babylon would remain great. He wanted his kingdom to continue. This was a sinister plot that Nebuchadnezzar had made. Important study note. So it says in verse 2, that Nebuchadnezzar, the sovereign, sent together the princes, the governors, the commanders, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the sovereign had set up. Now, all these different words under the text, we have these Aramaic words: Le achasta darpanea, signea, sakhavota, adar gazareya, gadbareya, ditravareya, tiftotoye. These are all the different words that are used here under the text to signify all these people. Then the princes, the governors, the commanders, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the magistrates, and all the rulers of province were gathered together to the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the sovereign had set up and they stood before the image, and Nebuchadnezzar had set up. The words here are used, Medinat Lechanucha. The words Medinat Lechanucha are, today, or at least from the evening of the 18th, Jewish people are celebrating Hanukkah. So Hanukkah here means to dedicate or to initiate. So they were initiating this statue at this point in order for the people to bow down to it or to gather around to it and give it some kind of glory. Then a herald cried out, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the zither, the harp, the pipes, and all kinds of instruments, you fall down and pay homage to the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up." Basically, everyone was to bow after this music or during the music. "And whoever falls not down paying homage shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace." Those that refuse to bow down will be thrown into the pit. This was a huge pit that they made in the ground where a lot of fuel was put in to make a big fire. In fact, some of Nebuchadnezzar's own men died making up that big flame in the pit. Therefore, at that time, all the people heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the zither, the harp, the pipes, and all kinds of music. All the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and petitioned, listen to this, and they petitioned the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the sovereign, the king, had set up. He wanted a massive crowd bowing to him, and not a one-by-one type bowing. He wanted everybody to bow together. He was basically trying to show his power. Remember, I just told you earlier that Nebuchadnezzar was a midget. He was less than 4 foot tall. So he craved power. Because of his craving of power, he wanted an authoritarian rule. As you see in some countries in the world, he was an authoritarian himself. The statue was located in the valley of Dura. This was a valley where several years earlier, where the Jews were taken to exile. And we are told that these Jews were extremely handsome, spiritual, their skin glowed, and the married women in Babylon could not keep their eyes off of them. And the women told their husbands how handsome these men were. And Nebuchadnezzar didn't like that, and he had them executed in the valley. The women still could not stop looking at them, and then Nebuchadnezzar had their bodies trampled and destroyed. So the valley of Dura is mentioned for that reason, and this is a place that God showed Ezekiel the prophet, and he told him to raise the dead from that valley. So one of the interpretations of Ezekiel the prophet in chapter 37 is that he resurrected the dead bones of the people that died there. By the way, these are at that same time. So the handsome men were resurrected by a Kohen. They went on to, we are told in some of our books, they went on to marry and live in Israel until the end of their lives. And by the way, that was also the place of the Tower of Babel, this valley of Dura. So therefore we're told in verse 8, therefore at that time certain Kasdim came near and accused the Jews. These were some Kasdim who committed Lashon Hara, who basically slandered against the Jews. They spoke and said to the sovereign Nebuchadnezzar, O sovereign, live forever. You, O sovereign, have made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the zither, the harp, the pipes, and all kinds of music shall fall down and pay homage to the golden image. And whoever does not fall down to pay homage, he shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews, Yehudim, whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These 3 men were singled out and said that these 3 men, O sovereign, have not regarded you. They serve not your Elahi, they serve not your powers, not your gods, nor bow to the golden image which you have set up. So this Lashon Hara, this slander is considered very bad by the Torah rules. And a lot of people today go about slandering each other. So be very careful how you go about and using words that you should not be using, because they can be detrimental to your health, by the way. It can bring on diseases. Lashon hara is not about not about talking false things. Even if the thing is true, it is considered wrong to do lashon hara. So the slander against them was that they won't serve your God, and it was true. They did not want to serve Nebuchadnezzar's gods or his statue. So technically you might say, oh, that was facts on the ground. Who cares about the facts on the ground? The point is lashon hara is lashon hara. It's evil. It's not meant to be like that. So Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring these three, of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they brought these men before him. And then Nebuchadnezzar said to them, do you not serve my Elahi, my powers, nor pay homage to the golden image which I set up? He was angry towards them, and he asked them, is my voice worthless, that you do not obey me? And so they said to Nebuchadnezzar, the king, we will not bow, because they wanted to go and seek counsel. This is when they actually go to see Daniel, that we do not want to bow. Now, you see, Daniel is not mentioned in their story, but they actually did go to Daniel, the prophet. He was available, and he does tell them that, he tells them, don't ask me. Guess who he sends them to? He sends them to the Kohen in the gate. Who was a Kohen in the gate at that time? It was Ezekiel the prophet, the Levite. So Daniel says, go to the Kohen and ask him. So they go to Ezekiel, who was a Kohen in the midst, was present. And when they go to Ezekiel tells them, do not make trouble. And then Ezekiel goes to make inquiry from God, because when they insist that they do not want to bow, first Ezekiel says to them, hey, it doesn't matter if you bowed, so what? You still worship the God of Abraham. What do you care? But they say, we want to know the answer. We don't want to, we do not want to bow. And Ezekiel's technically told them, your bowing or not bowing is going to make no difference. It doesn't affect you as a people. You still worship the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. But they said, no, but we want to know. So Ezekiel said, okay, I'll ask Hashem, I'll ask God what he says. So Ezekiel, because they insist they do not want to bow, Ezekiel asks Hashem, he asks God, and God is angry here. God is angry that the Jews did not serve me, hence why they are here. In other words, God is saying to Ezekiel, you know why the heck they are here in the first place? Because these idiots, they did not serve me back in the temple. Back in Israel, they were doing all sorts of idolatries, and so I cast them out. And now they want to know whether they should bow the statue or not bow the statue. So God was very angry with them, and then what happens? God simply says to Ezekiel, he says, I am going to save them. So Ezekiel started to cry and wail. But God did not want them to know they will be rescued. He wanted them to do it on their own merit, not knowing whether they will be rescued or not. So he basically told Ezekiel not to tell them they will be rescued. So Ezekiel got the story from God. Ezekiel knew exactly what's going to happen, but Ezekiel was told by God, you're not supposed to tell them. Just give no answer. So even though God gave an answer to Ezekiel, Ezekiel was told that I will save them. God told Ezekiel, I will save them, but you're not to tell them. So Ezekiel, here we see that here what happens in verse 15, we're told, if you be ready that at what time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, and all these other instruments, it says, if you bow not, you shall be in the same hour cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So what happens, Shadrach, in verse 16 we are told, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the three men who said, we are not careful to answer you in this matter, when they call out the king by name, here they call out the king, O Nebuchadnezzar. They said to the sovereign, O Nebuchadnezzar. So they called the king by name. This was considered offensive. So when they call the king by name and defy the king that we are not impressed with your statue, by your decree, and they are saying, we are not interested in seeking counsel in how to answer. They say we have an easy answer here. They were speaking derogatorily to the king, and they do not want to take the king's command. King is very angry at this point, and so the king says, okay, cast these three into the furnace. So because Nebuchadnezzar was very angry, he was raging now. He wanted to stoke the fire 7 times greater. And there was a fence around the courtyard, and out of the pit was a massive fire billowing out from the ground. It was not a furnace of the ground as most believe. It was a pit. It was a pit, deep pit. So it says, verse 20, he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. He asked his strongest soldiers to tie up the 3 to throw them in the fire. The 3 lads were not strong men, by the way, but when they answered very strongly, Nebuchadnezzar caused his mighty men to come and tie them up. Then these men were bound, we're told, verse 21, then these men were bound in their robes, their trousers and their turbans. By the way, it was an ancient custom for our people to wear turbans. So, if you want to look at those turbans, they are the kind of turbans that people wear in the East. So, they would wear those turbans, and we are told that they were cast with their clothes into the burning fiery furnace. They were tied up with a rope with their princely garments. They were wearing turbans, which were the tradition, as I said, had coverings. And we are told then, therefore the sovereign commanded, what he commanded was urgent, and the furnace very hot. The flame of fire slew those men that took up Shadrach. Even the people who put them into the flame, they died while putting Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the Gemara tells us that before this event, they go to Ezekiel the prophet, they ask what will happen to them. He says, I don't know. In other words, Ezekiel goes to God, gets the information from God. God tells him, I'm going to save them, but don't tell him. And then Ezekiel says, I don't know. After they leave, God tells them that they will die, and Ezekiel starts to cry. After they leave, God tells them that they will die, and Ezekiel starts to cry. Then he tells the men that they will die. After they go, God tells Ezekiel that he will not kill them, but rescue them. The reason why God says that is because he wanted the 3 men to do the act with confidence and trust in God so that the act will be great. So when the men went to die, they knew they will not be rescued. But God had a different plan. God had already planned their rescue. So God did not wanted them to act. In other words, it's like, insider trading. He didn't want them to know the answer before they do it. So God was testing the men. Are they going to stand firm? Or are they going to be afraid? And the men were very firm. So this is why we're told that God was going to rescue them. And why? Why was this held as a secret? Because this was to sanctify the name of God. And it was up to God at that point whether he rescued them or not. But we know through history that they were rescued. And the Gemara asked the question, where did Hananiah, Azariah, and Shamael learn this act in how to give up their lives? And we're told that they learned this act from the frogs in the plague of the Passover, because the frogs jumped into the ovens to be killed in order to sanctify God's name. By the way, I have frogs, that come to my home on my gate, outside from the yard, because it's an open area. I got frogs coming in, sometimes I see 3 or 4 frogs. I never kill them. I just let them go and put them to one side, remembering that the frogs actually helped us one time. So the Gemara also tells us that what was the problem, the idol or Nebuchadnezzar? And the Gemara says it was not the idol that was not the issue, as that was a statue of Nebuchadnezzar and he was not God. In other words, even if they bowed to the idol, it would have made no difference, exactly as the Ezekiel the prophet had said. But 3 mitzvahs, we are told that for 3 mitzvahs, for 3 good deeds, you have to give up your life, or you can. If a non-Jew says, eat pork or I will kill you, you can eat the pork and live, by the way. Did you know that? Yes. If a Jew is asked to eat pork or he will be killed, he can actually eat the pork and live. If a non-Jew tells you, if a Gentile tells you to commit adultery, commit incest, or ask you to murder a Jew or to bow to an idol, you have to die for the name of God. In other words, those are the things that you must not commit. Adultery, incest, and to murder a fellow House of Israel person. However, if you're in a crowd forced to bow to an idol, you should not do it, as it could cause desecration of God's name. That was the issue. The reason why the 3 decided not to do it, because in a crowd it will desecrate God's name. If there was no desecration allowed of God's name, and then they could save their life by bowing and nothing would happen to them. But if there's desecration of name, then they decided to give their life. In this case, God rescued them. This is one of the reasons Mordecai did not bow to Haman, was because Haman was wearing an idol around his neck, and Mordecai did not want to bow to Haman. So, this is basically the story. This is the story that I wanted to illustrate a little point, and I think this is sufficient for me to illustrate the point that this is a very interesting story. I kind of like it, and I wanted you to hear it as well. So I will end my study over here, because now you got a lot of information that you know what that chapter 2, chapter 3 of Daniel the prophet is about. So with that, I wish you to have a wonderful Sabbath rest, and of course those of you celebrating Hanukkah, have a wonderful Hanukkah. Until next week, Shabbat Shalom to you. I'd like to encourage you, for those of you who like to give to our cause of reaching with the Torah to the nations with the right guidance that God wants us to do. For that, if you wish to tithe, give zadaqah, charitable offerings, love offerings, please send them through at forever-israel.com through the Donate Now PayPal icon. You can PayPal it SHIMOUN63@yahoo.com, or you can Cash App it. If you're in the US, you can use Cash App $SIMALT, $SIMALT, or through PayPal. And if those 2 methods are not available to you, by all means write to me at Shimon63, SHIMOUN63@yahoo.com, and I can guide you by giving your offerings, donating. You're showing your commitment. You're showing that you are in favor of God's teachings, and therefore you will also be one to be receptacle of blessings as a result of that. So with that, I would like to thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Shalom, shalom to you.